Hey everyone, thanks for watching the CB vlog here on YouTube. If you like the show and you like our discussions and everything, go down and hit subscribe and subscribe to the whole channel and get Battle of Brews updates and the regular show, the deck techs, everything like that when it comes out. If you want to help out more directly, you can go check out our Patreon at patreon.com/commandersbrew, and that does us a real favor by helping donate financially. Now, if you want to get into the main topic, stick around because we are about to talk about the CB vlog topic for today, which is we're talking about the mechanics that are no longer featured by Wizards of the Coast. So to put a finer point on it, it's more of it's like a design philosophy that Commander players are kind of coming up against, right? So we're an eternal format. We deal with all the cards throughout Magic's history. We don't rotate, so we're dealing with the most powerful broken stuff from the old days, as well as all the garbage, the useless garbage from back then, and everything in between, right? So there are some things that we have in Commander that are in our format that we know as the most powerful things, and the things that Wizard just doesn't do anymore. And we're talking about mechanics and just general like design ideas. So a couple things that you see in a lot of Commander decks, because they're super powerful, that Wizards is no longer really creating in the same way. A couple things. Fast mana, right?
Yeah, this is Sol Ring, this is Mana Crypt, this is Mana Vault, this is Grim Monolith. Ways to get more mana than you spent to start with, right? That we all play with Sol Ring because they give it to us in every precon, and it's still a $5 card. Those other cards are like 100 more, approximately less. Like the Wizards supply and demand, they do not make new fast mana cards. They have realized we shouldn't have that in the game, but we have access to it.
Yeah, and they kind of are flirting with creating it for Commander with like the new Signet thing.
Arcane Signet?
Yeah, but even that's not technically as fast, right? Like that's not
you don't get more mana. Like,
it's the closest thing they've made in a long time. But yeah. Another thing we have here is just like low mana, 1 and 2 mana, like tutors.
Yeah. So
we're talking vampiric tutor, we're talking demonic tutor. Like you're just not seeing these things printed anymore into the current sets. Occasionally you'll get a reprint in like a master set or something, but that's kind of it. And it's
even like enlightened tutor, like that stuff too. Like they're not making those anymore.
And that's a 3 mana tutor. That one I don't get. Like there's
is that the 1 mana tutor? There's a white one that's 1 mana.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm thinking of idyllic tutor, I think.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, that's the 1 mana one. Gee whiz.
Yeah. While we're on the subject, can we have our equivalent enchantment tutor that is like demonic like the 4 mana one? Can we have the fairly costed give me an enchantment card?
There's a 3 mana one that gets planeswalkers that was printed in like whatever, one of the Zendikar blocks or something like that. It's like just give us the enchantment version of that.
Anyway.
It already exists. Like, just reprint it. Free sack outlets. If you listened last week, we talked a lot about free sack outlets. It's a thing that you're seeing more, and it's becoming more and more scarce to have just a sacrifice a creature have an effect, right? Because again, like Sean said last time, they now understand, especially in Commander, that sacrificing a creature is not a cost. It's a bonus. So to make the cost a bonus and a desired effect is kind of dangerous, right? So we don't see your Ashnod's altars and your Goblin bombardments or cards like them printed as at the same clip anymore.
And also original dual lands, right? Ooh. The original dual lands, like the OGs, the $600 ones. It's because there's no drawback and they give you access to 2 colors of mana. R&D through the years have decided that this is not how Magic should be played by our current standards. Like, we will never print another ones again. Now, there's an asterisk with Commander because in Battle Bond they gave us those multiplayer ones that are effectively original duels, as long as it's a multiplayer game, which we always play. But that aside, I feel like that was more of a move to help Commander players with a smaller wallet get a little bit more competitive. But we're still on the topic of that. It's still something that's like sort of against the design philosophy.
Yeah, and that's kind of all wrapped up into what we really want to get at here, which is because they have given us replacement effects, right? We've had those lands, we've had our growing rights of Itlamox and our evolutionary leaps for survival of the fittest and Gaia's Cradle, respectively. But so that's part of the design philosophy for Commander. It's the replacement effects and not the original effects. So basically, like what we're talking about here is when you build a Commander deck, right, and you stack it up, and you might not even be on a pure budget, but might not be willing to drop I don't know, whatever. How much is a Gaia's Cradle now? Like $400? I don't know. Like
I don't know.
I honestly don't even have any concept of how expensive.
I'm gonna look it up. I'm looking it up.
But whether it's 100 or 500, whatever, like that's going to be too expensive for a lot of people. But where does your deck stack up with the decks that are actually including those, right? We talk about the idea of having tuned Commander decks, right? It's like, well, your deck is very tuned if you have the most efficient and best versions of all these things, whether they be dual lands, whether they be the most efficient sack outlets, the free sack outlets, your cheap tutors, and your super fast mana, your mana crypts and so on. So this idea of using the replacements or using the originals can really tell you a lot about where your deck stands in any given meta. We always have this thing where we're always trying to gauge the level of what our deck is at. Oh, well, like what, between 1 and 10, like what's your deck at? And like
everybody says 7.
Inevitably, everyone says, oh, I don't know, 6 or 7.
Yes, it's every deck is a 6 or 7.
and to be fair, I think there are people out there who really know and like are like, well, this is like a 9 or a 10. Like it goes hard. It's a competitive deck. But sort of excluding the like uber competitive versions of these things, which is like you kind of know those when you see them. The rest of us are all milling around, I don't know, 6, 7, I guess. Like it wins sometimes. It also doesn't do anything sometimes. But like the fact that you've won with a deck kind of automatically qualifies it in your mind as a 7, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, I won once with this, so must be pretty good.
I mean, the decks I beat were 7, so this is a 7, right?
There you go, exactly. But that's just like an unreliable way to measure this, and I think mostly any version of measuring these decks is going to be fairly unreliable. But one, like, kind of what's it called? Signpost of knowing a deck's strength is like, does it include these old design ideas? Does it include these older mechanics, the fast mana, the super cheap tutors? Like if you're seeing those things pop up in your deck, that's another level. And like obviously you probably already know this because you're paying extra money for that, right?
Yeah.
So as a person, like if you come and you bring a deck that has a couple of the spells that are free, you know what I mean? Like even whether it's a pact or whether it's something that lets you untap lands, and there's combos going on with that. You've got original duels. You're tuned, right? You're talking about a tuned deck there. That's above a 7 right away, I think, personally.
Yeah. And so like I find the numbers are not that helpful because I want to know, what does your deck do? Like sometimes we talk about what turn can you win by, but I also find that to be a bit troublesome because like under what conditions though? Like are you talking goldfish? Like I don't know how that matters. Like and that mostly only matters for combo decks, right? Like
yes,
if you're talking
exactly,
I win on turn 5, well that doesn't apply to decks that use creatures. That doesn't apply to like decks that want to control the game, right? And win with some sort of late game combo thing. So that I don't think is helpful, but I think this could be a nice way to actually tell like some more useful information about power level. Like, so it's like how many like effects from the old days of Magic that have been the economy of Magic has changed. I don't mean the price of the cards in the secondary market. I mean like the Magic economy says that a land like Gaia's Cradle will never be printed again without the work of Growing Rights of Itlamok, where you have a chance to like deal with it before it becomes the problem. It was deemed too unfair originally. So I think that's a nice way. I mean, we all have Sol Ring, so we can kind of write that off. Sol Ring, if everyone has a Sol Ring, that's the same common denominator, so that we don't need to talk about Sol Ring because it's exactly equal. But everything else, like if you've got those fast manas, you're up a notch. If you've got tutors that cost 1 or 2 mana, that puts you up a notch. If you've got like if your combo is like relies on free sack outlets and Ashnod's Altar, and you're gonna generate infinite mana with them, that is also like Ashnod's Altar will never be made again in a modern set. So like we can safely say that if you have Ashnod's Altar, that puts you up a bit of a notch. Now, I know what you're gonna say, but those are fun cards. I want to use those cards. It's like, of course, use those cards. We're only talking, this is a helpful discussion to decide whether your deck matches up with the other decks at the table, rather than everyone saying 7.
Exactly. I think that it's a better question to ask, like, you're you're a deck that's based around sacrificing. It's like, do you have like Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar? It's like, well, yeah, obviously. It's like, those are the best ones. It's like, okay, well, that's a little different than maybe a newer player who's just entering the game and they've accrued some sack outlets from, like, let's say the last couple of current standard sets, or maybe some of the commander sets where it's like, I didn't get an Ashnod's Altar, but I got this other card that's kind of similar that, I got to pay for. It's like, okay, well, that's a great way of knowing power level there is going to be pretty different, right?
Yeah, I think your example of Evolutionary Leap is excellent, right? Like,
yes.
that's an excellent sack outlet that gives you tons of value, but it doesn't work for free, and you can't just infinitely do everything you want with it unless you work really hard and use other cards that maybe generate treasure tokens and all that stuff. Like, but at that point, great, more power to you. That's the intended space of that combo these days.
And I will say this, and perhaps I'm biased, and it is just me, like, speaking. I don't speak for anybody else, but like, that type of deck is always, it seems more fun to me, right? Like, it's always more fun to see a player who's put together cards from like where they started playing and forward, and then maybe they've gone back and grabbed a few, key things that they wanted for their deck or whatever, and then they bring it to the table, and it's like, oh yeah, you're running that from Guilds of Ravnica, or you're running that from, whatever else. So it will result in a lower power level, but as we say on this show, and as if you're listening to the show, you probably are close to sharing the same ideas, but like it usually makes for more of a fun game that way.
Yeah, and I want to restate, we are not saying these cards shouldn't be played. We are not saying you are wrong for running these cards. We are merely saying, let's be aware that these cards come from a time when Magic was different, and if this puts your deck up a notch. Let us be honest with that so that we can facilitate that discussion at the table. And if you do have those, maybe because you were playing back in the day, maybe because you spent your money, we want you to be able to play with them, right? That's definitely sure. But we also want the best matches. I personally, Sean Tabaris, I think it's so fun to use cards like Sunbird's Invocation. But those cards don't have a place. I love the Great Aurora. That's probably a better example for me. I love that card. Yeah. But that card has no place in a meta where it's all fast mana and quick tutors and combos that can win in turn 5 with free sack outlets. So I personally would, my decks run Sol Ring, and I probably run a couple of free sack outlets, but I don't think I run the other categories of things. So yeah, that's a great signpost for me and other players to get together and learn whether these will be a fun game.
Yeah, so, and I think generally speaking, most people out there are not going to be on like one end of the spectrum or the other. I think we're all going to be somewhere in the middle where, some of our decks have some of these powerful effects, or like you might have one Mana Crypt in one of your decks, but like the only thing, what we're saying here is like, this is just a good way to tell other players what to expect out of your deck, kind of, right? It's like, you may not be planning to win on turn 3 or 4 or something, but you might still be loaded with fast mana and tutors and stuff, and you might still just have a super powerful deck that way. And it's just a good way of just letting people know that like that's the level this deck plays at, like, as opposed to just assigning it a number that in your mind makes sense and is probably right for what you're thinking, but doesn't make sense to another person, right? It's always good to just communicate, as we always say. That's the real key. Communication is always the key when we're sitting down to play, and understanding power levels of decks so that everyone can have a fun time doing it. So yeah, as long as we're upfront about all that kind of stuff, I think everyone's going to have a great time.
Yeah, let's all have a great time.
Let's all have a great time. Play those cards. Play those cards. Have a great time. I would also like really recommend And I think like if you watch, there's some episodes of Game Nights and stuff where they'll just do like precons out of the box and stuff like that. And I know the guys on Commander and are a big fan of doing like a league type of thing. If you're a person who plays with the crazy tune decks, man, I do recommend just picking up a precon and playing it that way for a while, because I think, you know, if you're used to being that really high power level, you're gonna have a great time kind of experiencing the other side of things.
Yeah.
Anyways, great topic there. Good time. Everyone get on the same page, and thanks for viewing this. And thanks for sticking around.
Let us know in the comments a good card that you think comes from the olden days of Magic that is like good, but technically is not fair by today's R&D levels.
Yeah, that's a great question. What's a design like aspect that we don't see anymore that you guys think is just like very, very high powered for Commander?
Yeah.
Love to see those entries. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Big thanks to all our patrons who make these episodes possible.
Yeah, and if you want to check out more comedy videos, check out our Brews News playlist.
Make sure you follow us on Twitch TV to see when we play live.
If you want to chat with us, head over to Twitter. We're at Commanders Brew.
And please hit subscribe to ding the bell and find out when we got new stuff coming out.
See you next time.
Bye.